Welcome to the Top Order podcast. On This Week in Cricket, we break down the Australia victory over the West Indies in Barbados. We're also going to talk about a number of other things. I didn't read the run sheet, so it's probably not worth me doing the intro. But just for the record, we're going to talk about India versus England. They played a test match and they're about to play another one. And some New Zealand news. Conway missing out on a squad to go somewhere. I think to Africa, aren't they? They're going to Africa.
They are going to Zimbabwe and South Africa.
All that and more, and probably a better intro from Binksy next week coming up after the swish. To borrow a phrase, well, boys, not a great intro from me to start the podcast, but we are going to get better from here.
Okay.
Just because I opened the show, we'll talk about Australia versus the West Indies first, and you've written in your prep notes on the run sheets to an easy victory for Australia. Big smiley face emoji. Talk me through it.
What? I want you to talk me through it. Win the toss, bat first, easy win, job done, isn't it?
Being 20 for 3, having won the toss and batting notwithstanding, I think if you were to put the entire test match into 9 or 10 words, sure. But I think there's a lot more to unpack, particularly as Jamie said early on in the piece, 20 for 3, not a brilliant start, having won the toss and electing to bat, Jamie.
Yeah. I mean, is that a misread of the conditions? Is that not wanting to bat? I don't know. Not wanting to bowl first. I'm not really too sure what the decision was. Certainly when I turned it on and saw them 22 for 3, I kind of thought, well, that's an interesting choice. Notwithstanding the pitch was not probably batter friendly initially, and I guess it raises the perennial question for us around Australia's batting, particularly that top order. And yeah, I'm going to throw it straight back to you, Baldy. But where are we with that? I mean, it feels, we were talking off air, but it feels like Australian bowlers, high class, very consistent, know what they're doing, kind of sort of getting the batters out of trouble, whereas the batting, okay, Smith's out, there's been a few changes, but it looks very, we're not sure in that sense. What's your perspective on that? How are you?
Well, I think we've got the right personnel in place. I'm just not sure whether or not Cameron Green is in the right spot in the order at the minute at number 3. And I was going to ask you this question from a kind of, you've been around professional setups, Jamie, you've helped players prepare. It's clear that Konstas has a weakness on off-stump ball coming back into him, potentially between bat and pad or hitting him on the pads on that inside edge. Cameron Green has a weakness in that he plays with very hard hands early in the innings.
Just outside off aim.
And tends to play on the stumps a little bit across himself. And I've seen him play with an angle bat a couple of times where he could be a little bit straighter. So are those technique issues or are they mental preparation issues, as in this is how I'm going to prepare to play knowing that that's how bowlers are going to target me? Jamie, do you think it's a combination of both, or are you seeing more of one than the other from those guys?
Yeah, I think those technique things you're talking about there, they seem quite fundamental for players that are at the top of the order, and you're not always going to be playing on conditions that are going to be conducive. The expectation isn't there at the top of the order, it's going to move around. You're probably going to play and miss. And I think particularly with Cameron Green, that the hard hands, that it's like trying to go at a sledgehammer with the new ball sometimes. And I think, but is that an eagerness then to want to score? Is it a I want to get on the scoreboard quickly, so I'm going to maybe push at stuff. Konstas, you've probably got to be better outside off stump, haven't you, at the top order than probably what he is at the moment. So it's difficult. I think there's a number of things. It's like, what guarantees have they been given about their position? Do they feel as though they're fighting? I think back to the England teams of the 90s where, players were given one test match. I think cricket has evolved a lot since then, but, if they're going in there with this idea, I've only got 2 or 3 matches to cement my place, that's a lot. that's a lot to be taking on. It's always almost like I have to score, and we know with that type of mindset they can just encourage people either to do the wrong thing or to kind of completely go against their natural instinct and start to do stuff they don't want to do. So it's always interesting to know what assurances they've got. Do they know what their roles are? You'd like to think they do. You'd like to think that these things have been well mapped out. But of course, if they haven't, all it does is serve to create a lot of insecurity and uncertainty for the players, which, as I say, then has a negative impact on your technique, because if you're unsure, if we think about in general life, if we're unsure, we then start to internalize, oh, am I any, what am I doing here? What are my hands doing? What are my feet doing? We start thinking in a way that we wouldn't normally do. And of course, at that level, you don't want to be thinking, well, at any level, you don't want to be overthinking. You want to be doing the natural thing, which is, it's a simple game. If you see ball and you hit the ball, but it's not always done that easily. Yeah.
But I mean,
Yeah.
Baldy. I mean, we talked about this a little bit last week, but I think the selectors do have to take some responsibility for kind of the merry-go-round that they have done over the past little while. I know, yeah, there's been a few circumstances on why that's happened. Obviously, they went to different conditions and, all of that kind of stuff. But I still think they could have managed this a lot better by, I don't know, backing certain people. And look, Smith's going to be back for the second test. I don't know, probably Inglis misses out, I guess. I don't know, exactly what they're going to do. But, last week, George Bailey was like talking about Konstas and Inglis, yay, we're excited to give them another opportunity, further their test careers. Why did he not give Konstas that opportunity in Sri Lanka, where there was probably a lot less riding on it in terms of, the situation? So, I don't know. It's a lot of the technical stuff, I think, is similar to what we talked about in the preview of the series. I think there's the fact that those pitches, we talked about that traditionally over the last few years in the West Indies, it's been pretty hard work with the bat in general. You look at some of the scores and they're very, very low. And the West Indies have got a good seam attack.
I think we do have to, there's a lot to unpack there in what you've said there, Stu. I think we do have to give the West Indies a ton of credit, particularly for the way they bowled. I thought they bowled tremendously at Australia, both innings in different ways. We'll talk about that in a sec. But just to round out the conversation on the Australian batters, I think Sam Konstas to me looks a little bit like he's not quite as assured mentally as he could be. And I think there's two reasons for that. One, he's been dicked around a little bit from a selection standpoint. He should have been opening the batting in Sri Lanka, in my view, particularly because it would have given him three or four more bats in a low pressure environment, so to speak, or as far as Test cricket is concerned. And then he could have had another couple of bats in the World Test Championship, and all of a sudden we'd be talking about a guy who's 15 or 16 innings into his Test career instead of 9. And he just looks unassured at the moment, because I think there's a lot's been said about the way he played against India. Was he too over the top emotionally, and was he too attacking, and is he going back into a shell? So he looks uncertain to me. Cameron Green just looks like a guy who's young in his Test career and hasn't really figured out how to navigate the first 20 or 30 balls of his innings when the ball is doing a bit. And I don't necessarily think that hard hands is going to be the death knell of him being able to be a number 3, because Ricky Ponting had really hard hands and drove very hard at the ball, particularly early in his innings, and often he would nick off. But as he got more experienced, as he became more used to opening or being at that number 3 position, I should say, in Test cricket, he learned how to navigate the first 20, 30 balls a bit better, put a shot away that he wasn't really comfortable with until he had 30 or 40 balls in. And there are a lot of players like that. Steve Ward didn't play off the back foot with a horizontal bat shot until he was sort of 15 or 20 runs, because he knew that he would flash at the wrong length or the wrong height. So I think that we've just got to exercise patience if we think that Cameron Green is the answer at number 3. And if you have a look at the structure of the Australian side at the moment, there's no one else other than Smith who would go into that position, and he doesn't seem to want to. So it's kind of it has to be him for the next little while, unless we replace Bo Webster at 6 with Cameron Green, but that requires him to bowl. So
and Webster looked very good.
And look, anyone who is selling Bo Webster stock right now, I've bought all the stock on Webster Island. I've built a causeway to the mainland. I've got there's a 7-Eleven there now. There's a bowling alley. I've started to build a bar, so I'm going to replicate this bar on Webster Island. So if anyone's selling Bo Webster stock, just get in touch with us at toporderpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll sort you out with some transactions. I cannot speak highly enough of the guy, because every test match he plays an innings of substance, and he does something with the ball. He only got 2 wickets in this test match, but you have a look at the names on the sheet, who they were, and the position of the game. Vital wickets for Australia. And look, in a test match where a bunch of people dropped a bunch of catches, he was safe with the hands as well. So could not speak more highly of Bo Webster. Look, lots to like in the lower order for Australia. We'll talk about catching, I think, in a little bit, because the dropsies were certainly contagious. I think Bishop hit it on the head. It was absolutely contagious in that test match, particularly for the West Indies, but also for Australia as well. Green missed an absolute sitter in the gully, missed a dolly off Starc. Carey missed an easy one. The West Indies dropped, I think, 7 chances over the course of the test match. Australia, I say only, but they dropped 4. But I really, really liked the way that Alex Carey batted in that second innings. We needed... that test match was in the balance for a long period of time, even after the 100-run partnership between Head and Webster, and Carey batting with the tail, taking on the bowlers and looking to hit straight. So if the ball did a little bit, he was still hitting through the line. I thought his innings was fantastic. 60 to 65, I think it was, in that second innings for Alex Carey. Valuable runs, and gave the bowlers, finally, they had something to bowl at.
Yeah, brilliant. And the bowlers, I mean, which bowlers do we want to talk about first? Because, we just mentioned all the drop catches. It feels like we should talk about Shamar Joseph first, honestly, when you're talking about that. Because,
let's talk about him.
Well, one, he seems to just love playing against Australia. I mean, how good was that? He's just ripping through them at the start of that. He was sort of had it just always seems like he's able to make something happen. And it's weird, because it doesn't seem to have had the impact. Like, I think, as I said when we did the preview, some series of the West Indies we don't get to see over here in New Zealand. So I haven't seen every single time he's bowled. But, against Australia, in all these games that I've seen, he just is able to make something happen. Even in that second innings, seemed like he had the magic touch where he could run in and make the ball either bounce, hit the splice of the bat and fly over the slips, or he'd then run in and bowl and did ground grubber and take out Travis Head. So I think I also saw that he's had the most drop catches off him since 2024 or something
in world cricket.
World cricket and Test cricket. So there were lots of times in that game where they take that. Whoever takes that catch. I mean, there was the Travis Head one in the second innings. West Indies take that. I think Australia would have been 107 for 5 or something. And
completely different complexion to that test match.
Totally.
If West Indies hold their chances. Jamie, that young fast bowling attack, it looks like it could be one for a long time for the West Indies. Alzari Joseph, now the senior member of the attack. Shamar Joseph, 26, makes stuff happen. Jayden Seales, who took 5 from this test match, only 23, making stuff happen. That looks like a nucleus of a good bowling attack for years to come for the West Indies, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of it's probably one of the most excited I've been in recent times watching the West Indies, because it feels, I know you shouldn't always live in the past, but it feels like they're sort of going back to their heritage a little bit about, exciting fast bowlers, difficult pitches, and all of a sudden it becoming a very, very different challenge of playing the West Indies. And I think it is exciting. I think you look at the years that you've rattled off there, they've got time on their side. The good thing as well, I think you look at their actions and they look typically really repeatable. They look like these are bowling actions that they are going to sustain these players through quite long careers. They are repeatable. They're bowling at decent pace and they've got high skill levels as well. So I think it is fascinating and going to be really, really exciting where this bowling attack can go. And I think that was, there was when Australia were 23 for 3, it kind of reminded me of England teams going there in the 80s and the 90s and getting blitzed, in that first morning, that first day. And I think this is what we probably remember the Caribbean being a tough change of conditions. I think somebody made a point, just about the FIFA World Club, whatever it is that no one really cares about over in America, and some of the players had come out and said, Bellingham in particular had made a comment about, the pitch surfaces being different to what they're used to. And then the commentator made a brilliant observation, saying, "Well, but that's what we used to have in football. When you went to the when you went to South America, you'd play on different pitches, so it became a factor." And I think in world cricket, in Test cricket, we still have that to a point. You go to India, you go to the subcontinent, it's different. You go to Australia, it's different. You go to the Caribbean, it's different. And I think it was starting to maybe see that kind of home advantage a little bit more creep back into the West Indies, particularly with the conditions, but also with that bowling attack. So all exciting, I think. Yeah.
I'm massively excited by that West Indies bowling attack. I think Seales is going to get quicker. I think he's got maybe at 23, he's probably got another half a yard of pace in him, I think. And Alzarri Joseph and Shamar Joseph as the leaders of that bowling attack, I think that's a very, very exciting position for the West Indies to be in. And look, I think there's room for improvement in their batting lineup. I know that
room for improvement in it. That's for sure.
I know they got rolled for 190 in the first innings, and they were like 100 for 7 in the second innings. But
maybe Shamar needs to go up the order as well.
He's not far away from a promotion. I think, honestly, Alzarri Joseph and Shamar Joseph in particular are looking at that batting lineup and going, you know what, I could bat at 7 and 8. And I think they're, I think they're probably 8.5s, but they're good 8.5s in that they're going to attack. They're going to come off on occasion. I thought Shamar Joseph's innings was a brilliant
beautiful shots.
Counter-punching knock. He took the Australians on. He didn't try and hit every ball, but as soon as he got one in his zone, he didn't hold back. And look, other than the send-off that he gave Pat Cummins, I was like 9.5 out of 10 for that guy, even as an Australian fan watching that because he was enjoying his cricket. He was taking it to the Australians. He was talking back to Josh Hazlewood when he smashed him over the deep square leg fence for 6. So I really, really enjoyed watching him play. And I think that Jamal Warrican is probably going to, if he plays the next test, is going to be batting 10, maybe even 11, because both of those Josephs are going to go above him in that batting order for sure.
Sorry, Stu.
No, you go, Jamie.
No, I was just going to say, for me, you've also hit another nail on the head. Is the aggression you see, in those two players? Like, it's all right. Maybe it's kind of gone a bit too far, but that level of emotion when they're bowling, it's confrontational. Again, it's the stuff that, we've probably not had, and I think it's quite good to see. It just brings an element of theatre to the game. So but I think we see that in their batting as well.
And I think the West Indies should lean into it further. Honestly, if they were going to make changes for the second test, I would bring Alec Athanase back into the side. I know he's not in the squad, but I would have someone like him at number 4, and I would promote Brandon King to the top of the order. I'd go, right, we're going to attack Australia. And I know John Campbell played the lap scoop against Hazlewood.
Weird shot that was.
But to me, if you're going to have guys doing that, you have your Brandon Kings doing that. You have Shai Hope at number 4, and you go, right, we're going to lay the smackdown upon the Australians by going, all right, if we're only going to bat for 55, 60 overs, we're going to try and get 300. And we're going to attack with Shai Hope. We're going to attack with Brandon King. We're going to attack with... I thought Greaves was excellent in the second innings. I thought he looked every inch a real test cricketer. A little bit more circumspect than Shamar Joseph, certainly, but wasn't afraid to attack the Australians and drove beautifully through the offside. So I think if he's going to bat number 7, that's a fantastic guy to have at number 7. Bowls a little bit as well. So again, I always say it when I see the West Indies play, there's so much to like about the West Indies. If they could just put consistent performances together, particularly with the bat. They could have had Australia under real pressure here in this test match if they'd held their chances and, one or two other things go their way.
You say one or two things go their way. Do we want to talk about the Australian bowlers, or do you want to talk about the things that Roston Chase didn't think went his way?
Well, let's talk about the controversy. I want you guys to talk about the DRS stuff, the things that went against the West Indies. So I think one or two things also went the way of the West Indies as far as DRS is concerned in terms of, the LBW situation. But let's talk about the real controversy that was in that sort of first innings, I think, with the Chase dismissal and the head one as well.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, so I don't know, anyone who listening probably has already seen it, but the Roston Chase one where, he clearly thought he's given out LBW, he clearly thought he'd edged it, went up straight away, seemed confident. That they show the footage and there is a little spike of noise, but whenever they've balanced the pictures, the ball is not next to the bat when that noise happens. Adrian Holdstock says ball is not next to bat. There's a spike, but ball's not next to bat. You're out. You're out. And then the Travis Head one Alex Carey's one where he catches it. Great catch, absolutely brilliant. If you're going to call it a catch, an absolutely brilliant catch to dive back and take that off Shea Hope. But the ball, it's one where the ball is touching the ground at some point. There's no argument there if you ask me. And I honestly have seen them ruled different ways, so I don't really know what the process is. And I think that's my challenge with this, and I think that's probably where Roston Chase is frustrated, that different third umpires might rule these things differently, and that's where you can go. Like, I mean, he talked about it as well, and it's, you mentioned those Australian players the three guys who got 60. You get in on this, like this wicket was very difficult to bat on, and against good bowling attacks, starting was really tough. And those two batters that we've just mentioned were the two batters from the West Indies who got going. They built a partnership, and they were in a position where if the two of them keep going, they could build a substantial first innings lead. And they both go in, controversial sort of circumstances. And I can see why he's frustrated. I just think that like I said, my struggle is really with the process, and I don't quite know how you resolve that because yes, I agree with Holdstock that I think Carey caught that, but he also put it on the ground. So what's how do you judge that?
Yeah, really, really difficult one. Jamie, do you have a view on the technology aspects of it? Because I would like to ask you about how does Roston Chase and how do the West Indies recover from that? Because they did have a couple of LBWs go their way. The Khawaja LBW was just clipping the top of middle and leg. That was given out, stayed out.
I thought that was not out.
There were two in the second innings. I think one of the top order players was given not out, clipping the top of the stump, stayed not out. And then Greaves was given not out, again, clipping the top of the leg stump or clipping in the outside of the leg stump. And again, given not out, stayed not out. Australia retained their reviews. But there are three decisions that go the West Indies' way. But in the totality of the match, it did feel like the West Indies, despite getting those three go their way, did not get the rub of the green. And as captain, Jamie, how hard is it to internalise that, put it aside, and then get the team ready to bounce back for the next game?
Yeah, I mean, it sometimes feels a little bit like with DRS that the benefit of the doubt, as we used to call it, to the batsman seems to have completely, or not completely, but seems to have, is not always considered. Like, the catches, those ones where they're hitting the ground, they're always difficult, aren't they? Because, you need 3-dimension perspective, and obviously the camera is only 2D, so that's limiting. And I think where there is ambiguity, we should always be going with the batter, should we not? I guess that's the kind of the tradition of the.
That's what you guys say.
Yeah,
the bowlers
and
going, come on.
we've got examples like Stuart Broad who cut one to first slip. So but it's kind of. But I guess going back to Baldy's point, I think these things are ultimately distractions, aren't they? So. So DRS is there to enhance the game. It's there to enhance decision making. The technology isn't flawless, so it has issues with it. And I think as a team, as a captain, you sort of have to accept that there are ambiguities in it. And on some days, it for some decisions it will work perfectly clean and very clinical, and for others there is that debate, the inside nick, the double noise, the lack of depth perception on the catch. I think these are the things, but it's very easy to kind of let those things dictate and like take up a whole host of energy. So you could be stewing over that for 2, 3, 4 days going into the build-up of a test match. How useful is that? Not at all. Not at all. So I think a big thing is around accepting, normalizing that these decisions, I don't want to say they even themselves out because I don't think they do, but I think it's like some days it will be okay and other days it won't. But it's like not letting this dictate the narrative, because you can't control what's gone. You can only control your reaction to what is coming up. So I think it'd be a lot around that as a captain. It'd be a lot around, not letting the emotion of it. It's a real. I mean, if we get into the psychology of it, it's kind of like people demand fairness. I demand that decision be fair to me, and that's really what they're proclaiming. And if you kind of dissect that, the world isn't fair. Bad things happen to good people. So you could challenge it philosophically, but it's around just sort of, just trying to normalize and accept, I suppose, in short, would be my take on that.
And very difficult, I think, if you're in the moment, and we've all been there, to rationalise and be self-aware enough to go, okay, that one has gone against us, and it certainly went against the West Indies. That dismissal of Chase, and I think the Shea Hope one also definitely went against the West Indies, and in a game where that could have been not a game changing, but a game enhancing decision. It could have made it more difficult for Australia to get a first innings lead. Who knows what the transition outcome of all of those kind of sliding doors moments could have been. Ultimately, Australia won this test match quite well. And I think the Greaves-Shamar Joseph partnership kind of masked over the fact that Australia really did dominate the West Indies. 100,
it could have been all
100 for 7 really in that second innings. And it was even less than that, I think. It might have even been 70 for 7. So Australia did dominate that game with the ball, in particular the fourth innings. And I think it would have been a much different game had the West Indies had a 100-run lead in the first innings. Definitely. And could have put a lot more pressure on Australia. Even chasing 200 would have been a bit of squeaky bum time at 140 for 8, as the West Indies were. So, look, all of those things, Chase, Shamar Joseph, the coaching staff, they've got to put that aside. Darren Sammy's got to put that aside and prepare them mentally.
He was furious with those catches. Yeah. I think, you could see him just so angry when they were dropping those catches, because I guess he knew. Right?
They're the controllables, right? They are the controllables that the West Indies can make changes to in order to come back for the second test. They can't control what Adrian Holstock does in a bunker, with a red light and a green light and a couple of buttons. They can't control that outcome, but if they take care of their catches, man, they can put some pressure on that Australian top order. And whether it's Inglis at 4 or Travis Head at 4 or Steve Smith at 4,
back, I think.
If Smith's back and ready to go for the second test, they can put a lot of pressure on Australia. And I think they're a good chance to really devastate Australia, because we look fragile at the moment with their batting.
Do you not think some of the mitigation for the catching was the pitch, being up and down? And I'm not trying to make excuses, but if you're in that cordon and it might go and it might not, it's hard to predict. Well, not that you're trying to predict, but I guess you can sometimes go from being on your toes to your heels, because you're like, is it going to come up or am I going to have to lunge forward? It creates that uncertainty. I think, like you're saying, though, at that level, you would expect a lot of those catches to be taken. And I think, in the past, we've spoken a lot about momentum, haven't we, in sport? And it's like, if we see one catch go down and then another, and then it's like, oh no. It's like, it equally goes the other way. If you take difficult catches, then you see people also take difficult catches in the same game. So it kind of perpetuates that way, but it also goes on the spiral. But yeah, I mean, what do you think about almost like the nature of the pitch and how that kind of dictates? Am I just trying to be too nice to these people for dropping dollies?
I think there were one or two low ones. I think there was a low one at second slip that was forgivable if you're thinking about it in the context of, well, did variable bounce play a part in the anticipation of where the ball would arrive for the slips fielder? But there were a couple there that were
quite a few that were just
that were regulation height, and if you can forgive a player for, as Smith did, missing one that was a screamer, right? If you get one that screams at you and you don't quite react in time and it bursts through your hands, particularly if you're close.
Yeah, if you're talking about pitch variable bounce,
you can forgive that, right?
Smith was up closer in that World Test Championship final because he was trying to...
And you can just about forgive one that's a very low chance if it dies and the fielder doesn't get it, or the root one the other day that swung at him after it hit the bat. those are the ones where if it bursts off the side of a hand or bursts through your hands, you can forgive that. But there were a few there that you would describe as regulation chances, even at club level. And I don't think those are the ones that are going to be on, well, they are going to be on Darren Sammy's radar for this next week. I would not want to be a member of that slips cordon. I would be getting the softest of soft gloves for catching practice, because I think they're going to get quite a few this week in the lead up to the next test. I would want to be standing at mid-off for the rest of the series, I think.
Before we leave the West Indies Australia series, I think probably, Baldy, you should give us a little bit on Josh Hazlewood and that Australian attack, because they were fantastic. I will just say, if we're looking forward to the next test, the last test at St George's that was played, which is the second test that's coming up, I looked, Jamie, and it was England got bowled out for 120 in 64.2 overs. I had to refresh that scorecard about 15 times to try and figure out, was this, I think that was only in 2022, but
so pre-baseball, but
it was just before, and they sent a few different players, like Root wasn't there. It was Alex Lees and Zach Crawley. Dan Lawrence was at 4. Very, very different. Maybe Root was there and Bairstow. It was a very different sort of England side to think that they could bat 64 overs and be all out for 120. But that's sort of the test that we might be looking ahead to. And you would think, if that's the case again, this Australian bowling attack is going to cause some damage to the West Indies again.
Yeah, well, yes, they can. I mean, Hazelhoff was excellent.
Hazelhoff?
Yeah, well, that's why they call him Hoff.
Is it?
Yeah, Hazelhoff.
Ah, very good. Okay, I didn't actually know that.
No, I didn't.
He was excellent in this Test match. I mean, Mitchell Starc goes past Jimmy Anderson for most wickets in the first over of a Test since his debut. Yeah, he got 20 in this. He got on to 20 in this Test match with a little flick down the leg side off Brathwaite.
He's been doing very well recently in that taking wickets early on sort of role that he's got.
He's fantastic. Red ball and white ball in that mould. I like what he's been able to do in terms of wobbling the seam a little bit and pushing the ball across the batter a little bit without conceding the half volley, which tends to be the Mitchell Starc modus, right? He's trying to swing the ball, and if it doesn't, he'll either end up on leg stump because it's not swung back towards the left-hander, or he slides it across and gives a nice easy half volley through the covers. So I really like what he's been able to do there. I thought that as good as the West Indies bowled, and the West Indies lengths were tremendous in this Test match, I think that Hazelhoff and Cummins in particular looked at what the West Indies did with length, and they made sure that they bowled that immaculate top of off length. And as the wicket got slower, as the bounce got a little bit more up and down, Hazlewood pulled his length back just enough to be able to get variable bounce. I mean, he is a tremendous, tremendous skill bowler, and I don't think he gets enough credit for it, as good as he is and as much plaudits as he gets. Before we move off the Australian series, Nathan Lyon doesn't really often get a rap for wrapping up the tail, and I just wanted to give him a little bit of credit on this podcast. Late on whatever it was, day 3, Australia needed 2 wickets. Partnership was building, player was attacking. Yes, Lyon conceded 20 runs in a couple of overs, but got his man and then finished the game the next ball. So he's got to get a lot of credit for that. I thought it was just a terrific piece of professionalism from Nathan Lyon to finish the game for Australia, because that's what you want your premier spinner to do, right? You want him to bang out the tail, and away we go. So well done to Nathan Lyon on that one. No other takers for Australia versus the West Indies before we move on to England-India.
Good. Yeah. Easy win.
Easy win.
Smiley face emoji.
It won't be exactly. Won't be the same the second time round. There'll be a little bit more squeaky bum time, I think.
Well, it seemed like there was a lot of squeaky bum time. Just looking at the comments that you were providing for our group chat.
Yeah. As I keep saying, the lower scoring the game is, the more it brings the teams back together, the more it brings the West Indies bowlers into play, the more fragile it makes our batting lineup look, and I think the closer the games will be. So a low-scoring game in St George's, I think, plays into the West Indies' hands a little bit. Right, let's talk about England-India. Jamie, you've reviewed the sort of not fallout, but the wash-up of the first test between India and England. Is there anything on the agenda that we really want to talk about here in terms of what's transpired over the last 4 or 5 days in terms of selections coming up for this next Test match? Have we got any England fast bowling news? I think that's the one that we're really thinking about. And where do we think India are going to go from a selection perspective? Because I've got one or two changes I think that they should make for their side.
Yeah, so I'm aptly dressed. So I'll go with the England take. So I guess the big news is that Archer is back into the 15-man squad, and I think that's raised a few eyebrows. He made a return for Sussex this week for the first time, playing first class for 4 years. And by
I
all,
couldn't believe that when I heard that.
yeah, I thought it was an error, but yeah, 4 years for
Yeah.
not playing first class. But by all accounts, bowled well, bowled consistently, kind of went through the gears. I think his sort of first or early spells were quite sedate for Archer, and then I think the confidence then started to come, and then he started to go through the gears. And I think by the end of his sort of bowling tenure, he was kind of bowling with good wheels. I think the whole sort of messaging has been around: is he fit enough to come into the 15-man squad? And Rob Key has been very bullish and said, well, he's worked extremely hard. He sort of knows himself. I think the medical staff have been extremely diligent and done as you would expect. So I think, but it has raised those perennial question marks that often the old school bowlers will say, is that you need miles in the legs and all of these kind of analogies. And is he bowling fit? He might be physically fit, but is he bowling fit, and is he bowling ready? And I think, there's lots of conjecture about who's right and who's wrong on that, I think. But he's not. My take is he's not going to be just thrown in there having just played one championship game for Sussex. There's stuff that we're not going to have seen that he will have done. He's obviously gone through an IPL, albeit it's a limited overs, but he sort of went through that. The big question mark for me is, if he comes in, who goes out? Who is this? Because then I've kind of like, do you change a winning team? And that's probably quite old school, because England have a mantra of, well, yes, because we want to win every game,
Yeah.
so we pick our best team, and it doesn't matter if you scored 100 or taken 5 wickets. If we want to win the game and we see it this way, we're going to do it this way. So yeah, that's kind of the big news, I suppose, from a selection perspective. All the time, you see, we've got Jacob Bethel carrying drinks as well. So we've got a super talent that's waiting in the wings. And, is it like a child that you're just keeping on the leash, so that when you do unleash him, he just goes crazy? Or, at what point does frustration start to set in for him? But it's difficult to get him in, I suppose. So yeah, they're just some observations about what's happening from a bowling perspective, and yeah,
What do you
yeah,
what do you reckon gives the best balance to the side, boys? If Archer comes back in, you've obviously got to treat him like a super awesome race car, not like a Mazda 3 or Toyota Yaris.
I think he comes in for tongue, doesn't he? That's sort of that. You when you and Binksy were talking about you guys were talking about how they've sort of built the selection now based on, well, this guy fills this role and this guy fills this role, and it's like you were saying about Overton when Overton was first in the squad. Well, he's not there because he's the fourth or fifth or whatever best seamer in the country. He's there because he is the bowler that can come in and do this person's job. So yeah, is Tongue the one that they see as the quick bowler that we have in our attack?
yeah. I guess he's probably the one who can ramp it up to 87, 88. So if you were going like for like, it would be kind of like Archie would fulfill that role. I think it's hard. It's harsh on Tong, isn't it? Because I thought he did a great job with the tail. And it's not always an easy thing to do, but he came in, he bowled quick, he bowled quick Yorkers, he intimidated, and he took wickets and he mopped them up quickly. Equally, Archer's more than capable of doing that as well. So yeah, as harsh as it might be, probably it would be Tong that would be the like for like. It'd be hard to. I think Wokes has a clear role in that team. Bryden Coss clearly has a role as well. and Bashir. So yeah, I think when I was looking at it, I was thinking probably Tong if they're going to go that way. But
Is that what you do though?
on what basis?
Would you drop Tongue for Archer? Let's just say arguments say Archer is locked into the team. Would you drop Tongue or would you drop Cars? Because I think Atkinson's safe. Would we agree?
Wokes, you mean?
Wokes.
Oh, was it? Oh, yeah. Sorry, it was Woke. Yeah, Woke's not Atkinson. Sorry. Yeah, but you'd think that Wokes is safe because he bats 8 as well.
I think so because home ground Edgbaston. I think he brings runs. I think he has a role to play. He's not obviously your express, but he does swing it. He can swing it, and when the old ball, if they can get it reversing, he has that potential to the left-handers to get it to duck away. So I think he does stay. I would keep Cars. I think Binksy and I were very, very glowing about the role he had and how he came in and hit the deck hard and brought that aggression that I think we perhaps definitely need if we're gonna go to Australia. So I think it is Tong. The psychologist in me goes that this is a guy who's trying to forge his career, his Test career. He's just taken wickets. Do you sort of you want to sap that? Do you want to? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not answering your question, Baldy, because I sort of mixed a little bit. Yeah.
I think whichever way they go, they're going to need to not put Archer in cotton wool, but they're going to need to limit the number of overs he bowls so that he can bowl with maximum effectiveness. I don't think it's worth him coming back into the side and bowling 23 to 24 overs on day one, right?
No.
They need to have a structure in their attack where he can bowl 12 to 15 overs in a day maximum, 3 spells, maybe even 4 spells, short spells of really hostile fast bowling to make these Indian players play their game differently. I think if you allow Jaswell or if you allow Gill to get comfortable, if you allow Punt to get comfortable, they will dominate you. As we've seen, I mean, if you have a look at the psychology of their Indian team at the moment, they had 5 guys get hundreds. They took enough wickets to win the game, and not a lot went against them, and they still lost that game. And England looked pretty comfortable chasing 370 on the last day. So there's work to do for Gambhir and for Shubman Gill to get them back up for this second Test match, because they played a pretty good game of cricket, I thought. And still got well beaten by England at the end of the day.
Well, I mean, Jamie and Binksy talked about it.
Yeah, 100%.
They said, and I agreed with you, Jamie. They kind of made it look easy. Like England sort of did it with no fuss. That was sort of the most surprising thing about chasing down 370. And I think that's where, I mean, you just named Baldy all the hundreds that the Indians scored. I think there were question marks not around the players of that Indian batting lineup, because we all knew the talent of them, and but it was that there were a couple of different names. There were sort of players. Yeah, Punt hasn't been in great form. Obviously, 200s suggests he's fine, but Shubman Gill was taking on the captaincy. We didn't know how whether that was going to impact his role. KL Rahul back up the top of the order, although he's rock solid away from home.
He could bat at 11 and still get 100.
In any way, yeah, he seems to be. As soon you take him out of India, and he's one of the best batters in their side. So even with Nair and Sudarshan kind of coming in, and although both of them, I think when they kind of got their knocks, they looked the part. But I think their batting now has shown them we have the goods in this batting lineup to win games. We have to back ourselves and pick four proper bowlers. Like we cannot use that number 8 spot to sort of, a bob each way kind of situation. We can't have either Nitish Kumar Reddy where, because we don't need to strengthen the batting. Like we don't need Nitish Kumar Reddy batting at 8. If you think he's good enough, pick him ahead of someone else in the batting lineup.
But carry on your point, because I'd like to riposte.
Well, and then and we don't need Shardul Thakur because he's not one of our best bowlers. Like, I think that's quite clear. I think we all sort of thought that at the time. We we don't need him. So I think that showing says we have to just pick our 4 best bowlers, because I think one of them's probably not going to play in Jasprit Bumrah, which, in terms of how they're going to kind of manage his workload. I mean, if I were them, I'd be saying, hey, Jasprit, we're 1 down in the series now. Do you really think that this test you could maybe go again to try and keep us in here? But I think they have to. Thakur cannot play.
I completely agree with you in that I think Shardul Thakur is a luxury that India cannot afford from a bowling perspective. I want to come back to that, Jamie, with Jasprit Bumrah. If it's a live series, if you're the England coaching setup, you've got to have the conversation with him that he continues to play as long as he's got rest in between test matches. As long as it's a live series, he's got to play, doesn't he?
Yeah, I wrote down here Bumrah roulette, because it's kind of like, you're going to get 3 out of 5 from him. So yeah, how are you going to use them? I agree with you. I think if it's a live series, he has to play in this test. But you recognise, you surely you want your best bowler out there when it really, really matters. You run the risk of him playing in, the 5th test, and it doesn't mean anything. It's a bit like a penalty taker saying I'll go 5th in a penalty shootout and then did not get into that. So it's like you always want your best players up front, and when it really matters. He did look slightly fatigued in the second innings. I thought he didn't quite look at what he did in the first innings. He's a super talent, and you want to see him on the park. But I thought he just struggled a little bit in the second innings. Conditions probably didn't.
But doesn't
help.
that change?
Yeah.
Doesn't that change if he gets more help? If he gets more effective help, if he gets Arshdeep or
it could be Kuldeep even.
It could be Kuldeep. I mean, whoever it is, the guys that are Akashdeep even, those guys give India more with the ball and take the pressure off Bumrah a little bit, because he's not having to bowl as many important spells, because their 4th bowling option from a seam perspective actually gives you something rather than is at best a holding bowler. I know that it makes India's tail look really long, and England ran through India's tail in this test, even with Shardul Thakur in the side. The temptation would be to swap him out for Nitish Kumar Reddy.
You got to trust yourself, though, don't you?
Look, I agree with you, but they used him in Australia, and he was tremendously effective against Australia with the bat. So I'm just saying that the psychology of the way that they're going to come from perspective in that way, that's maybe where they're going to head. But I think you've got to go, we need to take 20 wickets. We have to have Bumrah on the field, a little bit like Jofra Archer. We've got to look after him a little bit. And I think that means that they have to go actually with a guy batting at 7 who could bat at 5 and has batted at 5 for us. We've got enough depth. I want to talk about the order before we get off this topic. But then they have to go, look, how do we take 20 wickets? And I don't look, as much as I love Shardul Thakur as a potentially a white ball cricketer, I don't think he's the answer to the question of how do we take 20 wickets and look after our premier bowler at the same time, because I think he's got to. I think Bumrah's got to play, and they've got to pick someone who can give them a little bit more with the ball, particularly if there is going to be any reverse or any of those kinds of conditions. I think you've got to have someone who can exploit those. And from an Indian point of view.
And on that, I mean, I would be plumping pretty hard for Kuldeep to play. I know, I mean, people talk about Edgbaston and talk about it being sort of a that it's not a bounce wicket; it's more of a kisses off the surface kind of wicket, and that maybe brings someone like Arshdeep into the situation, because he can swing it both ways. He can seam the ball. I mean, he's talked about skill bowlers before with Hazlewood. I think Arshdeep is one in their camp that can certainly do that. He's had county cricket experience. For me, it'd be between those two, or if Bumrah's not there, then I think both of those two should come in, because it's the variety. I mean, I actually thought Siraj bowled pretty well and was a bit unlucky at different times. He, a couple of spells weren't the best, but for the most part, I thought he bowled without luck. But yeah, I just think like you said, you have to go. We have the batting to win enough games here. We've got to find 20 wickets, and the best way to to take 20 wickets is the variety. And I think that the way England bat as well, having someone like Kuldeep there, they're going to take him on, and he's such an attacking weapon. And you can use him, I think, in much different ways than they use Jadeja because of just the different type of bowlers that they are. Kuldeep, we've talked a lot over the past 12, 18 months about how he's become a quicker bowler. He's become a really attacking weapon. Look, staggers me that you can have someone like that in the side and not pick them. So,
Jamie, if you were England, who would you least likely to want to face? I don't know if I've said that sentence correctly, but who would you least like to want to face if you were the England batting setup? Would you rather face Arshdeep Singh or Akashdeep, or would you rather be facing Kuldeep Yadav and go, right, okay, I can take this guy on?
Yeah, probably Kuldeep, I think, from what you've said. I think, yeah, you probably, yeah, because as Stu said, he is a weapon. He's attacking. I think, yeah, like you don't want to face Bumrah, obviously. Yeah, I think just because it's different attacking, kind of going head to head a little bit. I think the whole thing around the team selection seemed to be quite conservative. It seemed to be mixed. Like we're not quite sure how to do this. Like we want to attack, but we also want to make sure we've got stuff in the bank. Whereas I think the teams that probably give England the best games are the ones that sort of go for it, that they attack. So I think where you've got a bowling lineup that is a bit more aggressive, a bit more pace on, perhaps, probably evens it up a little bit. I felt that the tail was way too long, but I think probably that top order should have gone big in the first innings. I think that's, but yeah, I've roundabout answered your question, but yeah.
Speaking of which, last point on this England-India series before we move on, and you want to talk about some New Zealand stuff
just a short
before we finish the pod. Some talk this week has come out as to whether or not India should change their order around for the second test and going forward, and whether or not Karun Nair should come up and bat at number 3, and Sai Sudarshan should potentially drop down as low as number 6. I think if he's not going to bat at 3, then he's going to bat at 6, because Punt shouldn't move from where he is at 5. Shubman Gill has decided that he's going to bat at 4, and that's the best position for him.
Seemed to work quite well.
Seemed to work reasonably well, I thought, as well. So, like, should they swap Nair and Sudarshan around? I mean, you're a big Sudarshan fan. Where do you think he's going to be most successful, Stu, in this Indian order?
I mean, I think long term, you're thinking that he is a number 3. I mean, he's a top order player. I mean, you guys were talking about the sort of psychological effects of mucking people around, basically, or putting in and out and mixing things up before. I think certainly the Indian fans that I've interacted with seem so far to be sort of resigned maybe is a negative way to put it, but seem to be aware that this is a transition sort of time for Indian cricket, with Kohli and Rohit moving on, and actually it means that new guys get some opportunities. I think if you like Sudarshan, which I certainly do, I think you put him at 3 and you bat him at 3, and yeah, I mean, maybe you don't pick him. Maybe if he fails for the next 3 tests, then you have to start thinking about something else. But if you thought that he was good enough to bat 3 a week ago, I don't think what he did in that test should have changed that for anyone. And same with Nair. Like, if you thought you had it right, I always think, yeah, if you thought you had it right before, unless someone does something to suggest otherwise. I mean, he gets the duck in that first innings, but he's caught down the leg. Like he's just caught down the leg side. It's not a flaw. He's just hasn't flicked one wide enough, I guess. Like he hasn't done a huge amount wrong there. So, and then the second innings, he smashed one to the fielder. So, yeah, I think he's got an enormous amount of talent, and I wouldn't be mucking around. And to your point, really around, yeah, I think that would be a massive mistake if they think, yes, the tail was poor, so we're going to strengthen our tail. Like, look at what cost you this game. It's not the runs. You had enough runs to win this game. What cost you the game is you were unable to take 10 wickets in that second innings, and That's what you need to focus on now, not any of these other little scenarios, because that's how you're going to beat. That's how you're going to beat England. As Jamie's just said, you've got to take them on, and you've got to be prepared to take. You've got to challenge them, because they are going to challenge you. The way they play this cricket now, it's quite clear that they're going to challenge you. Whether it always works for them, we've had many discussions about that. But at home, largely it has worked for them, and the way they're able to play on their pitches. They did a brilliant job. They obviously identified Bumrah in that second innings and went, look, we see him off. We can win this game quite easily, because they batted. I think he went 7 overs for 18 or something in that first hour of their batting, second innings batting. It's sort of unheard of for the way that England have played their cricket. But that was, I don't know, you guys have talked about Bazball, sort of, can we play Bazball but have, really show some intelligence and play the game situation? And that was 100% an example of, yes, we can do this. Like, we're going to see out this, and then we can just, when Shardul Thakur comes on, we'll take him on and we'll hit boundary after boundary, and we'll get our ascendancy back in this situation. And yeah, look, I think India has to go, where can we challenge England the most? And it's with which four combination of bowlers, and Thakur and Tish Kumar Reddy are not in those four, so they can't play.
Jamie, just before we close out on the... Oh, go ahead, Jamie.
Well, no,
go ahead.
Just on the Siddharthan thing, I'm a massive fan like Stu, and I think the only thought I had about watching him was that you want him to be the player that he wants to be. And I know he can't be the T20 version, but I think what we saw enough in the T20 was his ability to mix, like, sort of really positive with shot play, and that the go through the gears. And I think the challenge for him will be, he's now got more time. What does that do to him? And you don't want him to become like really defensive and cautious. And I just got an inclination in the second innings that that's perhaps what he was doing. But I get it. You're on debut. You got a duck in your first innings. You don't want to get a pair. I get it. But I think it's more about recognizing why he's been given this chance. He's been given this chance because of all the gears that you can go through, not now to become a blocker at number 3. And I'm not meaning he is a blocker, but do you know what I mean? You want him to go in his shell, because he is such a talented who can go 360 with his shot play. And I'd like to think over time he'll be given the opportunity to display that.
Can India bounce back, Jamie? The last little thought before we move on to the New Zealand domestic stuff that Stu wants to talk about. Can India bounce back in this second test? And if they can, how do they do it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've got the best bowler in the world, haven't they? So
maybe
if
he plays,
yeah. But it's and they've got the bat. They've shown they can score runs in these conditions. So, but the points that you make around the bowling, they need to get that bowling lineup better and more conducive to go head to head, more attack minded, and they need to give help to Bumrah, because there were so many times in that last test he was given the ball every time they needed a breakthrough, and that's that. You basically just you're flogging your racehorse. So you've got to have when you think of cycling, you need your domestiques around you to kind of get your sprinter across the line. So they need a few more. Of the people that can also be given the ball to take a wicket and not always just relying on Bumrah. So, yeah, I think they can. They're an excellent side. But I think they just need to be a bit braver with their selection, I think.
I like the analogy of the domestique. I actually think that India need more Mark Cavendish type riders in their lineup, because Shardul Thakur was the domestique and he just did not do his job. I actually
he wasn't
effective.
He didn't bowl many they didn't give him the ball to bowl those overs.
Okay, well, speaking of flogging, let's not flog Shardul Thakur any more than we already have. Yeah. Look, the key for India is to take 20 wickets and to keep backing their batting. And if they can get anything out of Sudarshan and Karun there, then England are, they're going to be on notice, I think. But this England side, look, tremendous. I really loved your analogy midweek of baseball for grown-ups. I think that England are starting to really get the balance right with the way that they're playing their cricket, and they look so much more dangerous as a result because they just aren't giving the opposition a sniff. And if India get a sniff in this test match, they're going to have to take it because England are really starting to look quite dominant. But should we move on? We've got one more section to cover off in this pod before we wrap up this week in cricket for this week, and it's some New Zealand international news ahead of the Tour of Africa, Stuart. Is that right?
Yes, it is. Yeah. I mean, we sort of signalled this, New Zealand sort of heading to play a T20 series in Zimbabwe against Zimbabwe and South Africa, and then they'll play a test against a couple of tests against Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe now playing a test against South Africa B for some reason.
It's South Africa, but with half of most of their bowling attack missing.
Yeah, no Markram. Bavuma's obviously injured.
Yeah, no
maybe
Markram,
still singing songs.
No Markram, no Bavuma, none of their bowling attack. But holy shoot, we want to give Luandre. I can't remember his last name. Luandre, someone or other. Might be Luandre Pretorius.
Yeah.
Holy shoot, did he bat well? Youngest guy to get 150 for South Africa, broke a bunch of records. Dewald Brevis got the fastest 50 on debut for South Africa. So, look, they might have sent a B team, Stuart, and I might have been cranky 24 hours ago about South Africa. God, look, they're the world champions. They're not the bastions of Test cricket. That's the wrong word, but they are the kind of the caretakers at the moment of Test cricket as the mace holders and as the team that the world is looking at from a Test cricket perspective. I thought it was a little bit disrespectful to not send their best side to Zimbabwe, but far out. Luandre Pretorius could be a real deal for going forward. So he's a huge find for them. But sorry, you were going to talk about New Zealand domestic.
No. So, so we're heading over there, play a T20 series before that Test series. And I think, it's one of, I guess, the start. We're all looking for the next ICC tournament. That's sort of always what everyone's targeting. And for New Zealand, the T20 World Cup is, or for all of them, the T20 World Cup is obviously next. And I'm finding the T20 selections quite interesting, mainly because I think that they are starting to divert from our other teams, which is not something New Zealand has traditionally done. We've tended to have quite a similar group of players. And look, you look through this lineup, we've still got Chapman, Ravindra, Mitchell, Phillips, Bracewell, Santner, Henry. Look, O'Rourke, Duffy. Okay, we are seeing.
There's not a great departure.
Not a huge amount, but I think Williamson won't play T20s again. I'd be very surprised if he's out of there. But we've taken Tim Seifert, and Tim Seifert as the only keeper, which is an interesting signal. They've given Mitch Hay a lot of opportunities in the past. Certainly Gary Stead. It's under, when he was coaching, it seemed like Mitch Hay, and I will not be surprised if we see Mitch Hay in the Test squad as either a backup to Blundell or, if we see Blundell, even though he is coming off 100 in his last Test. So we will see that squad soon, I'm sure. But again, Finn Allen has been sort of brought back into this side. We've seen they've talked about Lockie Ferguson not playing in this series, but is there with is back in the mix. He's someone that's missing through injury. But we've also seen Adam Milne. So the idea that T20 not specialists but T20 players and sort of building a side to play T20 cricket rather than let's just pick our sort of squad of 15 best players is certainly what's happening. And I mean, the big omission, is it a big omission? I guess when you guys, when we talked about Conway when we talked about the contracts and kind of maybe what the trajectory of the next few years would be for him, Binksy put it pretty bluntly and said, this is not starting to drop Conway from your sides. He hasn't performed well enough, but I think it's certainly interesting that he's now not even in the squad. He was the usually been sort of the backup keeper on these tours. Again, it doesn't really this series doesn't matter.
Phillips could keep it a pinch if there's an injury on the tour.
Phillips and Allen will
Finn
be
Allen
there.
will own gloves and he'll be there with gloves.
Yes.
So. At a pinch, they could fill the Conway role if they really needed a keeper for a day.
I think it's more significant that they've just said we're going to. It seems they're going Finn Allen and Tim Seifert, you two are now the holders for this opening role, and you have that opportunity. I mean, we've just seen Finn Allen, get 150 in Major League Cricket, absolutely smashing it. Did he get a donut today?
No, the ground's not huge.
Oh, okay, yeah, small ground. But anyway, they've said Seifert was fantastic in this final series, sort of home series. So I think they've made that switch officially now. Even though we've got a new coach in Rob Walter, they've gone. These guys are our openers. We've got Chapman, Ravindra, Mitchell, Phillips, who are going to be pretty tough to break up in terms of how they view that sort of middle patch of the New Zealand batting lineup. And then you've got the all-rounders in Bracewell and Santner and stuff. So I think there's a lot of questions around our bowlers, like which three sort of seamers that we end up choosing. But yeah, I think they've just this is the T20 team now, and I guess that's sort of I don't know. Maybe I should have known that was going to happen all the time, but yeah, I think it's a clear signal. You guys are in the position now, and it's yours to lose, really, out of this spot.
I don't think there's any surprises for me there when you have a look at that lineup, given that Finn Allen has had a really good MLC at the moment. And I think, if anything, what it's telling us is actually, for New Zealand cricket at least, that MLC is becoming a bit of a shop window to higher honours for some of those fringe players. I mean, for a guy
most of those guys are there, yeah.
Yeah, so most of those guys are there
for us.
And a terrific window for us to be able to see some of it as well, if you from a time zone perspective, maybe not a streaming perspective. But I think guys like Bevan, John Jacobs, and some of those up and coming players, if they can get themselves into MLC and get performing at that level, I think it's going to be a terrific stepping stone for New Zealand cricket, who don't always get those players going to the IPL and getting runs for their team, getting matches for their team. I think that MLC is going to be a great window for New Zealand cricket going forward.
Well, I think that your point about BJ Jacobs he's kind of the spear batter in that squad. And I think when you look through that lineup now, I think they've clearly looked at this side and gone, we're going to be more aggressive in T20 cricket. We've got Seifert and Allen who go hard at the top. We've got Chapman who maybe builds a little bit more, but then Ravindra's spent time up at the top of the order. We've got Mitchell, we've got Phillips, we've got Bracewell, we've got Santner. So all the way down to 8 now, we've got batters that can hit the ball out of the park. And I just don't. We haven't really built our T20 lineup like in this way. I think there were times when Finn Allen was in the mix, it looked like we wanted to do that, and he just didn't sort of take those opportunities. He's been given another shot to go and do it now, and yeah, we will see how it goes. But they've clearly gone, this is how we want to play our T20 cricket now. Jamie, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I just think what you've kind of got on the Conway situation is kind of like this contingency management of building for the next few tournaments and sort of moving beyond the playing group that you've got. It feels like there's a sort of a 3, 4, 5 year strategy starting to take place here, and unfortunately, it will see players like maybe Conway fall to the wayside a little bit. But I think it's exciting because of the reasons that you give of these players coming in and the potential that they have, but also their ability to be destructive. That the players you're talking about have clear capability, and yeah, it's going to be exciting to see what happens in that T20 World Cup, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, the door's not closed for Conway, right? Good, strong domestic form, strong franchise form around the world is going to keep him in the shop window for New Zealand. But what I like is that they're prepared to give these other guys a go. They're prepared to at least temporarily move in another direction that might be a little bit younger. It might be a little bit more exciting, and actually sends a bit of a message to Devon Conway. Go and get some runs. Go and play good domestic cricket, whether it's locally or internationally, and earn your way back into the side. Because I think, he's there in case of emergency for New Zealand. If Finn Allen doesn't show the consistent transition of form from domestic to international, he's been on fire in the MLC at the moment. But all of that needs to translate into international runs for New Zealand to keep his spot at the top of the order. Because Ravindra could easily bat at number 1 for New Zealand as well, I think. In white ball cricket, at least. Yeah,
and I mean, the Test squad, obviously this is Rob Walter's first tour. The Test squad, again, will be fascinating for me for all of those reasons. The young guys that we started to see, the Reece Marius, the Muhammad Abbas, Mitch Hay, as we talked about. will they get their opportunity in this Test series when it's, Kane Williamson's not going to be there? How much is he prepared to go, okay, as Jamie said, I'm going to build some squad depth for the core group that I want to play with over the next 3 years? Or do I just trust this playing group that, you look through that side, it's a very experienced side. This is a T20 series that essentially means nothing just before a 2-test series that's not in the World Test Championship. And he's picked a very strong squad. He's, resisted the urge to pick Adi Ashok. Ash Sodhi's over there. So he's not so far gone, let's use this as an experience opportunity, except for BJ Jacobs. So, we will see. And, I'm, again, fascinated to see what they do with this Test series.
Lots of cricket coming up around the international cricketing world. Obviously, we didn't cover Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, which has recently concluded. There's lots of cricket going on, as we said. South Africa playing Zimbabwe in Bulawayo at the moment. South Africa overnight, 418 for 9 after that awesome Laundre at Pretorius 150. There's lots of cricket for us to cover on the Top Order podcast. We will be back in your feed next week with another episode of This Week in Cricket, talking all the cricket around the world. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, enjoy your cricket, play it the right way, and we'll see you again soon on the Top Order podcast.